Hey everybody, welcome back. After a relatively brief summer hiatus, we're back, man, and we are more excited than ever, especially for the guest we have today. I'm really excited to bring you an exclusive conversation with Erik Day, who is the Senior Vice President of Small and Medium Business globally for Dell Technologies. In this episode, Erik shares really candid insights about how AI is changing the game for both sides of the equation. The small businesses, buyers navigating an increasingly complex AI offering landscape, and then the tech sellers who are using AI to win business faster and more efficiently with this highly fragmented small business market. We'll uncover why most companies are getting their AI to go-to-market strategy wrong. And we're going to discuss positioning strategies that cut through the noise and tackle that critical question: is AI just another tech wave like the metaverse, or something as transformational as the internet? Most importantly, Erik reveals Dell's approach to moving small businesses from AI experimentation to real implementation, the subject of a major report that we just released the first full week of September, addressing that crucial challenge of reaching beyond those 10% of early adopters into the mass small business market. So, enough of that yakking, let's get to it. Hey, good day, everybody. Dave Walker here with the B to SMB Institute. And this is like going back in time, because 7 years ago, whenever the heck it was, 2017, 8 years ago now, my God, we held our first B to SMB summit. The B to SMB Institute didn't even exist. And we just thought that what a cool idea if we got a bunch of our friends together in Chicago and talked about the challenge of selling to small business at large scale. And one of our very first keynote speakers, in fact, that year, Dell was awarded our first ever Brand of the Year award. Erik Day, welcome back. Gosh, it's good to see you. It's been too long.
Dave, it's great to see you as too. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm not going to presume that everybody knows who you are. I sure as hell should presume that everybody knows who Dell is, but why don't you give us, because I always find it fascinating, give us a little bit of your career history. You're very passionate about small business. Why? Career, and then why small business?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just celebrated 26 years at Dell Technologies this summer, which is amazing. Yes, I started when I was 12. Thank you for the compliment.
I was going to say it.
For a lot of those years, I was on mostly the consumer kind of SB kind of digital side. I did retail for a while, but about 10 years ago, I was asked to kind of look at our SB and now SMB practice to kind of understand how do we continue to put more emphasis on it. I mean, what you hear in the data is a lot of large companies, especially large tech companies, it doesn't seem like the market really thought that they cared about this part of the industry. And ironically enough, everybody knows Michael Dell's story, but in 1984, out of his dorm room, started the first direct-to-consumer, direct-to-business technology company that ultimately configured exactly what customers wanted in their technology. And over the next 40 years, we've grown and developed, and we've become one of the largest technology companies in the world that focuses on, and we're one of the only ones that focus on the complete end-to-end portfolio. Anything from a spare part or a battery or a PC to a monitor to everything to the edge and to the cloud and everything in between. And, you know, I think we kind of think about some of our key pillars, whether that's the modern workplace, which is ultimately trying to drive the new innovative PCs and using compute, to the modern data center and multi-cloud, to AI, which we're talking about today. But wrapped around our commitment to security and sustainability, we wanted to figure out how to drive that approach into a focus on the SMB community. Michael and the executive leadership team really truly believe that there is no large company before it was a small one. And to be there and to be a large scaling technology company really focused on the SMB market was really a passion project, and has been a passion project of mine now for the last 10 years. And if you really think about everything the world has gone through in the last 10 or 15 years, whether it was the financial crisis, whether it's the energy crisis, whether it's what happened with the COVID, all of the innovation, all of the things that, you know, really drive to make the world a better place comes out of this SMB market first. And in 2025, you cannot drive and scale those innovations without technology. And so Michael and the executive leadership team and leading the charge myself thought, how does Dell Technologies become at the center of those conversations, right? How do we win across our product lines, whether that's the PC, whether that's server, whether that's or compute, or whether that's the edge or multi-cloud, and even in the larger data center? How do we win at all costs as these companies are scaling? And how do we become the biggest part of that conversation? And I've ultimately been helping build that strategy over the last decade. And, with this change in AI, it becomes even more important now as businesses, especially the smaller they are, struggle with, where do I get started? How do I think about this AI revolution for myself? So it's a pretty wonderful place. And you're right, I am incredibly passionate about it.
Yeah, and that's what I love about you is that you really kind of walk the talk of being someone who is at the forefront of advancing the go-to-market strategies of this amazing company called Dell. But it's personal to you. It's always been personal. It's always felt like it's personal. Since you were 12 when you started at Dell, you've seen this amazing journey of technology since and I was there too, actually. In the late 1990s, you saw the birth of the internet, and then you saw the cloud, and then you saw mobile, and you saw e-commerce, and you've seen the metaverse, and you've seen all of these kind of technology waves, these major technology waves. And, I think we somewhat, those of us in the technology space, kind of give into our engineering instincts and get really excited about the new technology, right? And yet, I think that there are challenges that appear in every one of these waves, especially as it relates to small business. So what I'd kind of like you to talk about is how has the approach that small businesses take to first understanding and then embracing and then buying and then using technology during these waves. Do you think it's changed? Has it changed? Are the same kind of sins, frankly, being repeated over and over again, or is it kind of new every time? How do you describe this technology journey over 26 years?
I mean, I think it's completely changed. I think technology at one point was a nice to have. It ultimately was something that made companies a little more efficient. You had to, have technology when it came to, retailers checking out customers or being able to do email and kind of the common things that your customers need to do and have and to make more efficient. But for a long time, businesses were still pushing a ton of paper and they were surviving and they were able to survive. I think since the pandemic, that's all changed, right? There's been a warp speed push into driving the right efficiencies. And I remember even before the pandemic, 10 years ago, probably, Michael Dell being on stage at one of our Dell Worlds talking about, we're marching into the next data decade. And I think that it has taken that long, and the SMB community specifically, to really understand what that means and just what an absolute important intellectual piece of property your data is. And the more that you can digitize that data, the more that you can learn how to use it, the more that you learn how to secure it, manage it, organize it. It is, I think, really what is separating the good from the great when it comes into this kind of world of SMB. And it is a known fact that in 2025, if you are not a technology first run small or medium business, it is going to be hard for you to survive. It's going to be hard for you to innovate. It's going to be hard for you to stay ahead of your competition. And I think for the first time this last 5 years, I think SMB companies are realizing that they have to be a tech forward company. Like I'll even hear, a lot of companies that their main product isn't technology still consider themselves a technology company because it's so incredibly important in order to stay ahead and make sure that you can, make your dream of your business a reality that can be competitive, that can be invested in, that can ultimately be the kind of world-changing idea that you ultimately had, that you worked hard to bootstrap, that you worked hard to get investment on. Technology is ultimately what's going to make the change and has made the change into this sprawling industry that is SMB.
There's just so much to unpack there and so many different interesting angles in which to kind of continue the conversation, because I feel like You're absolutely right. It has changed amazingly. And I think you're also right that COVID was kind of a seminal moment when the concept of digital transformation, something that had, at least in theory, lived out there for a long, long time, suddenly actually came to rapid realization because small businesses had to get online. They had to deploy e-commerce. They couldn't exist in the real world. They had to move to the virtual world as quickly as they could. But I also agree that the data piece of this, I almost feel like it's something that's beneath the surface of the water for so many people, is they don't quite realize how incredibly important their data is. Certainly don't realize that it is the fuel that runs the engine of AI. If you don't have the data, the AI doesn't do real well.
No.
And I think not enough small businesses realize that their data is actually more valuable than their real estate. If they have real estate, I mean, it's physically more valuable than that. There's this concept that I'd like you to kind of talk, because I think Dell has always been very passionate about cybersecurity and the security and privacy of data, and always been on the vanguard of that conversation. Do you see small businesses getting it when it comes to the cybersecurity of their data? Or are they still kind of struggling with that as they don't really realize the value of it? It's kind of like, yeah, I'll leave the back door open.
Let me take a step back first. I think getting SMBs that really want to be successful in this age as we move to this revolution of AI, I think getting small and medium businesses educated around data, period, is step number one. I don't even think that all businesses understand how important data is now and is going to be for the future in the evolution and of the acceleration of their idea, of their business, of being a business owner. So I think that's step one, is just making sure that they understand that it's there, how to use it, etc. I think in parallel, you then ultimately have to secure it. I think for the most part, the smaller you are, the more new you are into your industry, I think the more likely you are going to lean on the idea of, if I'm buying Dell Technologies and I know that it has an Intel CPU or NPU, or it has Microsoft operating system, or it has these big names included in it, I'm going to assume that my data is protected, because that's all that these companies talk about, is how they're the most secure processing unit, or their most secure operating system, or they're the most secure XYZ. But that's only one level of security. So again, it's this education journeys that SMBs need to be on around, number one, how important it is for you to understand your data stack, where your data is, how it's being organized, how to properly use it. Part of that education is ultimately how to secure it, because I've been speaking at SMB conferences for the last decade talking about how, a majority, if not a large majority of small businesses that do have some type of data breach, or do get, ransomware, or ultimately become somewhat exposed from some type of data situation.
Violated.
Yeah. I mean, will go out of, many of them go out of business because they can't recover from that. And while it's a scary thing to talk about, it is reality. And so cybersecurity and data security has to be part of the ongoing conversation, especially as small businesses grow quickly, because as soon as you start getting funding, the sooner you're growing, the sooner your data is getting larger. The more your data is getting large, the more you have to talk about this idea of security. And so my advice, or my conversations to those businesses out there that are listening to this, is always be having data security conversations as you continue to scale your business. Always. What's that next level? How do I protect my data more? What's the difference between the security I get on the cloud versus potentially bringing things on-prem? Because, a lot of the conversations will have to adjust to just overall cost, and how do you keep your data secure, and how do I ultimately manage my costs the more data that I have? Because I know we'll get this before, but we get into the cloud conversation, it's a completely different story, because you have to you have to ultimately not only think about security, but you have to think about cost.
Right. So, excellent recap of kind of the journey of small businesses. Let's talk about, and we can be specific to Dell salespeople. How have salespeople who are responsible for, closing deals with small businesses on Dell's behalf, Any BDSMB company. How has their world changed?
Well, I think it's changed in a few different aspects. Number one, because of our commitment to the SMB community, we continue to invest in selling capability and capacity at
Hmm.
Dell Technologies. We do have the largest direct selling force in the SMB community
Hmm.
in technology because we believe that it's important for you to have that direct connection to us. But we also have a very vast and a very well-oiled partner community as well that we add on top of that. I
Hmm.
think what's happened in this kind of evolution of the next data
Hmm.
decade, the day of multi-cloud versus just, putting all of your eggs in one cloud basket, you have to rely on specialty resources because as you think about data center, as you think about evolving your data center strategy into a more multi-cloud environment, you have to have the right engineering expertise at your fingertips. You
Hmm.
cannot train a seller on every single aspect of every single thing that we sell at Dell. We still sell an end-to-end portfolio, as I was talking before. It is
Hmm.
impossible for every single seller to be able to go that wide and that deep when it comes to some really complex problems that small and medium businesses are trying to solve using technology and using kind of a multi-cloud data center type environment. You not only have the hardware itself, but you have to think about what software stack that you need to use, what hypervisor you're going to use. Do you ultimately want to build a private cloud in your office or do you want to co-locate it? What do you think about using a cloud service provider and building a private cloud? So there's all of these different aspects of making sure that we ultimately have the right engineering resources. So we built inside of Dell a specialty model. So once the generalist seller is able to pre-qualify the customer and ultimately being dangerous across our entire portfolio, our core sellers will be able to go deep on client, we'll be able to go half deep on server, then we'll bring in technical resources. Once that
Hmm.
server conversation goes into a data storage conversation and a networking conversation, which ultimately is the natural fit, we'll get some more specialty in there so that we can go even deeper. We'll bring in system architects. We'll bring in all of the resources needed in order to be able to have the right qualification to ensure that we're building the right solution based on the problem that the customer is solving. So I think that's the great thing about working with a company like Dell Technologies, that we realize that one size doesn't fit all. And that when you have to go really deep into the technology, into the engineering to ensure
Hmm.
the right solution, we surround that customer with the right resources that they have, and we bring in the partner community to ensure that the deployment is done right, the additional services that they need are done right, which is, I think, what really differentiates us in the market, right? No one builds a go-to-market engine like Dell Technologies. That's one of the reasons why we continue to lead in commercial personal computing. We lead in server and compute. We lead in data storage. We lead in
Hmm.
security.
Hmm.
It's one of the reasons why we have such a big name, and that's one of the reasons why we're leading in kind of this AI revolution with our partnership with NVIDIA and others, because we've known this stuff was coming for a really long time, and we put the
Hmm.
right resources, the right engineering, the right go-to-market, the right selling capabilities with our customers in order to make sure that they have the best experience possible because they might not have all the answers and they look to us to help them with them.
Yeah, and I think that while the model is frankly what large enterprises would come to expect, I mean,
Mhm.
they would sit there tapping their feet, going, "Well, where are my engineers? Where are all the depth of staff?" I don't think small businesses necessarily know what they don't know. That,
That's right.
and so they need that assistance. It's funny because it reminds me a little bit of a conversation that I had with Crosstown peer reviewers, Evan Goldberg at NetSuite, and he said, when I first started selling NetSuite out on the streets of San Antonio, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't selling accounting; I was selling the cloud, and
Mhm.
that's what I really had to focus my energy on in building the cloud capabilities and the cloud understanding and of that. Your approach to AI is particularly as delivered to small businesses is kind of through the hardware. It's not necessarily you've created an AI destination on site that people go to and say, I'm going to use the Dell AI today or even the NVIDIA AI today. You're really kind of packing it in with the hardware and the applications of your technology. Talk to me about how well is that working, and unpack for me basically the approach, the strategy and the tactics behind that.
it's kind of funny, right? Because I think a lot of people look at Dell Technologies and they think of us as a hardware company. And in many ways, I agree, we're probably a more of a hardware first company, but you cannot in this day and age not be both a hardware and a software company, right? Because
Right.
a lot of customers expect to at least get as close to a plug and play solution so that they can ultimately be up and running as quickly as possible. And so we have not only the right software from a data storage standpoint, from a compute standpoint, but we have hundreds of software partners and ISVs that we look at in order to be able to configure the right overall out of the box package for customers to be able to get to the use case that they need to when it comes to these new kind of AI workloads. And I think the first thing we do, at least in SMB, because I don't want to go too far because I don't want to overwhelm a lot of your listeners, but the first thing that we really need to kind of accomplish is, what are you trying to solve? We've worked with a smaller SMB customer who does a lot of the piping and boiling and does a lot of these stuff surrounds a lot of these big power plants. And they
Mhm.
go on site and they have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pages of manuals in order to be able to kind of get on site and ultimately build these capabilities for these power plants. And, we're working with them on a large language model use case for them to be able to get their field people access to what they need really, really
Mhm.
quickly with their own kind of AI application. And it first starts with the data and organize their data and how do we get their data in the right place and have the right security and, making sure that, we have kind of an idea of, do they want to do this in the cloud? Do they want to do this on-prem? And then ultimately, how do we build them the right compute in order to be able to utilize some of those applications to ultimately make their use case come to life? It's really incredible when you get into some of these conversations with customers because it's almost like every use case is a little bit different. How
Mhm.
do we use this ecosystem of partners and the ecosystem of the technology that we have in order to build the right solution so that we ultimately teach people using our technology how to properly use their data so they can bring the AI to the data,
Mhm.
not bring the data to the AI, right? That ultimately doesn't work. And I think that's really what the case is I think what we're working on now is more educating customers around how to get their data in the right place and how to make sure that it's organized right and they know where it is so they can start using the data in order to be able to build some of these AI models, whether that it's being able to use something that they can bring on, put their data in it, and ultimately use something that's out of the box, or whether they want to create something and of their own kind of their own use case. So it's a really cool time to be in technology because we're helping companies utilize something that they know how it works because they've used a chat GPT or they use one of these public chat GPT-ish type things and they see what it can do to make their employees more efficient or be able to get their content faster or be able to get to the answer faster, but they really don't understand what that means to build something for themselves. And I think that's
Mhm.
where Dell, with partnerships with NVIDIA and others, is really helping educate this world and how to ultimately get ready to build some of these things so that they
Mhm.
can stay ahead in their own
Mhm.
markets.
Mhm. That was terrific, by the way. As you said, you and Dell had a lot of time to think about AI. You saw it coming. You said, hey, this is going to be a critical part of technology's offering, basically, in a number of years. Did you talk to us a little bit about how you crafted the communication to really create the interest around AI? And what did you learn along the way? Because I think that it's pretty easy to kind of dial back the time machine and look at how is AI being sold in the early stages. Boy, is a whole lot of overpromise. I mean, it was a whole lot. Oh my God, this is going to be. And there was kind of it did kind of capture the zeitgeist of just there was a lot of gee whiz moments. I remember the first time I used AI, I said, okay, write a sonnet about my garden in iambic pentameter, rhyme it. I mean, I did the most obscure, weird English major shit. And bottom line is that it did it, and it did it an amazing job at it. And so it was easy to buy into the hype that, oh my God, AI is going to be unbelievable what it's going to be able to do. But tell us a little bit about that journey of building the AI mess.
If you think about the example that you just gave, Dave, think about that's all public data. So
Right.
I think the way that Dell really thought about it is it's one thing to be able to use AI with a bunch of public data and based on
Mm-hmm.
what's all out there in the ether. It's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different conversation when you want to use proprietary data, which is what a lot of, especially larger enterprise customers are doing now. But that's the whole point of how do you start thinking about AI when it comes to using your own proprietary data? And I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that Dell did really early on is we came up with almost like this engineering technique that turned into a great go-to-market strategy, which is the Dell AI Factory, right? We
Mm-hmm.
made people think about how to build a process coming into something that they might not know of it. How do you ultimately build this go-to-market engine that says, in combination with some of our biggest partners in the market, we are going to build a factory for you so that you can understand and we can go in and we can use this factory and able to actually build an AI workload that works best for your individual use case. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it starts with the data, then it goes into what infrastructure you have. It ultimately looks at the use cases. It makes sure that you have the right product and the right ecosystems. And then ultimately we partner with the right partners in order to be able to get you the workloads that you ultimately need so that you can start using your own data as part of these AI workloads. And I think it has been something that none of our other competitors have been able to do and communicate in a way that has really resonated with customers. And once
Mm-hmm.
you do that and you repeat it over and over and over, and at every conference and in every customer meeting and every, time that we're in the press, we're constantly talking about this AI factory. It really starts clicking in with companies of all shapes and sizes. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was one of Michael and Jeff's and the ELT's goals for this AI factory is how do we build something that every single size customer from smallest to largest can really understand and buy into. And I think it's been one of the greatest things that we did really early on once we knew the need for these kind of GPU high powered compute systems were going to be
Mm-hmm.
needed in order to build these solutions. It was an easy way for us to go to market and be able to shape the story from the largest customer down to the smallest customer in a way for us to do it. And I've been in some of these really big customer EBCs and I've listened to some of these engineers talk about it, and it can get super, super complex. The hundreds of thousands of GPUs that you ultimately need to build and the cooling that you need and the power that you need and capacity of data center that you need to the smallest of, hey, we can do this in a really small, interesting way for you. And I think it's been magical for us because it's just been a way for the entire company to use a similar process, a similar storyline for companies of every single size to really understand how they can bring AI to life at their company.
I don't think I need to tell you how unusual it is to actually be a marketer who thanks the engineers for a great idea.
It's
But
true. But yeah, it's true.
that's a
Needed
great,
sometimes.
and I entirely get it. And when I first saw AI Factory, I was like, such a great way to describe it, because anybody can envision. It's always in those simple words that people can envision what maybe it even isn't, but what for them it is, and this place that they kind of, it goes in one door and all my stuff and it comes out and it's a finished product and there it is. And I think that that's ingenious. Let's talk about, as we kind of get into the back third of this, I told you before that we were releasing a report, a white paper, a kind of an analysis of analysis today, actually, 40 plus pages that really paint the picture that AI is not market ready for most small businesses, or most small businesses are just not ready for AI. And that the very encouraging signs of experimentation, early adoption, the things that you expect kind of in that bell curve of market growth are just not really manifesting. And a lot of executives that your peers are starting to express pretty vocally a concern that, hey, experimentation is just not giving way to adoption, to mass adoption, especially to scale, which is really, that's the only way that you can make the small business marketplace work, right? Is you've got to scale it. You got to figure out ways to scale it. So I guess I'd ask you kind of a question in three parts. Observations of really within Dell of the adoption journey that your small business customers are on. And are you pushing your way through the early signals of, oh boy, this is slowing down? Second is, who owns the problem, I guess is the question. Does the small business own the problem because they're not data savvy enough and they don't really have good data systems? Or does the problem really lie in the fact that you guys are unusual in that you have a huge amount of effort and energy and staff that you put into qualifying this is the right fit? And then the third piece is that really what we're experiencing is something that historically you and I have seen, which is big growth in the early stages, decline, kind of goes into a valley, comes back out again stronger than ever. So now that I've given you an overwhelming number of questions to consider in one shot, try to take those three on. Sorry about that.
I'm gonna do the best that I can because you loaded and it loaded me up quite a bit with that one. But I'm gonna start from, I think, being as consistent as I can is that I think the reason that small and medium businesses struggle with adoption of something as complex, that can be as complex as kind of AI workloads within in workspaces, and we've said this for years, Dave, right? SMBs sometimes struggle to hire the right talent within their companies in order to focus on technology.
Right.
And, can't outsource everything forever, right? And for the longest time, you probably could, and especially with cloud adoption. And then, man, AWS can take all this stuff for me, and Azure can take all the stuff, and then it's just being done. But what that's done is it's given SMBs almost corners to cut for where they didn't really need to understand or have anybody within their enterprise actually thinking about the data itself, and the data was just there. And I think it has to change. And where I've seen SMBs adopt this idea of AI, they've had one or two freaking brainiac IT superstars working for them, where it doesn't take a lot of investment, but you're going to have to start investing in an IT head that understands the stuff and potentially some either contracted or in-house data scientists that can really think about what you want to do and what you're doing and how you want to use it and how do you want to kind of manage your data. And it starts with, where is my data? Is my data mostly in the public cloud? If I do these AI workloads, how much data am I going to add to it? Do I have the resources financially to be able to manage all of that? Do I need to start thinking about pulling some of these workloads on-prem and managing my intellectual property more closer to me to save costs, but then I can ultimately build AI workloads inside my own data center? Those are the things that we can help IT folks really grasp. But I think the IT folks that have been helping small businesses for a long time have either completely put all of their eggs in the public cloud basket, which I think makes it even more complex to start understanding and think about AI. They try to find kind of easy plug and play solutions through some of their cloud providers, which again won't necessarily get to the problems that they're trying to solve. It's not going to be, because a lot of these use cases are like I told you, are like fingerprints. And you might need a different way of looking at it, and kind of this kind of cut and paste approach to AI I don't think will necessarily work. And so I think you need to start thinking about investing in that, whether you bootstrap the money, whether you got some seed funding, whether you're on series A, B, or C, whatever it might be. Technology has to start being a in-house driven idea in order to make sure that you're ultimately starting and thinking about your data from the very beginning, so that you can ultimately start thinking about some of these AI things. And I think if you start doing that, I think you can start the whole okay, we started off, we freaking ramped really quickly, and then we went into this lull. I think we can start flattening out some of those up and down kind of performance metrics that a lot of SMBs go through, because they're thinking about being tech forward at the beginning rather than trying to be fast followers to everything that's gone out there. I hope that answered the question.
It does very much. And I think it connects well to some of the other things that you said. I mean, if data is really where the highest value lies, that's an easy starting point to get into. Well, where's the data? The data is in your technology. How do you access and use the data? Well, you do it through technology. How do I really optimize the use of that technology? Well, there's this magic thing called AI and its ability to kind of think faster, think more efficiently, think, frankly, more impactfully than you will ever be able to do, And don't be ashamed of that. That's kind of like,
Right.
yeah, you're not the guy who goes out and builds this stuff. You're the guy who basically understands what the value of it is. And
Yeah.
so I think that's all really, really important. And it trues up, by the way, Eric, with what a lot of, as we kind of talk to people about, hey, there's this slowdown in adoption and kind of a fear that what it really implies. And we, of course, concluded every conversation, well, what would you do? What are you doing and what would you do? And a lot of them said, I think our investment in the infrastructure to educate and train small businesses, that's the key. We can't just present the technology and hope that they'll figure it out. We have to give a lot more energy and effort into, frankly, the hand-holding required.
So funny, Dave, that you say that, because like we're even in this really interesting time where we've ultimately transitioned our entire PC lineup into AI PCs.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting small and medium businesses to understand the value of having an AI PC versus, because we're in this huge refresh period, right? Where Microsoft is ending support for Windows 10 next month. And so we're ultimately, and there's a whole bunch of options that you can go get in the market. And there's a lot of companies that kind of, of my competitors who haven't completely moved to all AI PCs yet. And small and medium businesses are sitting there going, do I really need the extra investment in an AI PC? Am I really going to utilize, a 40 TOPS device? And do I even really know what that is? And why is extra battery life more important? And, how do I ultimately use some of these AI applications on the PC that comes with? And what does Copilot really do or do not do for me? Like it really does kind of take a lot of energy and time for sellers to really sit down. And what I ask to customers is, ask about it. The answer is yes, you really do need this stuff. And if you don't know why, ask the question so we can have the conversation with you. I think otherwise you're going to miss out, and there's going to be competitors and other people around you that are even using those entry level AI capabilities that they can do, even if it's not them investing in their own massive compute AI driven workloads, ultimately adopting this new AI technology in order to make them faster and smarter, to at least get their teams engaging in AI so that they can ultimately set themselves up for some of the more complex stuff that we were talking about earlier.
I can't agree more. And again, I think that there was magic in what you were saying before. I mean, to say to a small business or ask a small business, what do you think your major competitive advantage is? Your single most significant competitive advantage, it's your data. And what we've always been about is let's figure out a way in which we unlock the power of that data through technology. And I think that's very, very powerful.
That's right.
Listen, damn it, I could go on for another hour. I think that what you've said is so salient, so pithy. I mean, it's really been terrific. I appreciate you doing this. I hope you continue to be such a leader in the conversation about how we bring new technologies to market, how we rise to the challenge of bringing this extraordinary thing called AI to market, because I do happen to be a huge believer in the fact that this is it. This is a once in a generation.
It's not going anywhere.
That really can be transformative. And if you've ever sat with a small business, and I have some investments that I've sat with, and I've helped them and watched them go through the aha moments of AI. And it's magical. It's the only way to describe it. It's magical of what they know it means to them. So I appreciate you participating in the magic here today. You've made magic. I appreciate you greatly. Thanks again for doing this.
It's my pleasure, Dave. Always is great to talk to you, and great to talk to your audience. We're always here for you. That's what we do. We want to be that educator as well as that provider of technology. So lean on Dell Technologies whenever you can, and I'm happy to have more conversations with you.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Between Two Bs, the official podcast of the B to SMB Institute and our 5,000 plus business to small business professionals. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes, the crossroads of the big B and the small B, Between Two Bs, on your favorite streaming services.